Christmas Eve should have been the happiest night of my life. I had the ring ready, the champagne chilled, and the faint smell of pine and cinnamon filling the living room. I was about to propose to the woman I thought I'd spend forever with. Instead, she looked me dead in the eyes and shattered everything. Her voice didn't tremble. Her hands didn't shake. She told me she was pregnant. But the child wasn't mine. It was my brother's. In one breath, she destroyed my future, my family, and my trust. The betrayal was a double strike, my fiancée and my own blood conspiring behind my back. I wasn't just blindsided, I was humiliated. And in that moment, I swore I wouldn't let them walk away unscathed. What began as heartbreak would turn into a cold, methodical plan for revenge, one they would never see coming, but one they would feel for the rest of their lives. My name is Daniel Reeves. I'm 31 years old, a software engineer at a mid-sized tech firm in the city, and until Christmas Eve, I thought I had the next decade of my life mapped out with precision. I'm not the type who thrives on chaos. I've always preferred structure, order, and the quiet satisfaction that comes from seeing things line up exactly the way you planned. That's probably what drew me to Claire in the first place. She seemed to fit perfectly into that sense of order, like the missing puzzle piece I hadn't realized I'd been searching for. Claire and I had been together for 4 years. I met her at a friend's housewarming party. She was working in marketing, sharp-witted, confident, with a laugh that had just enough rasp to make it memorable. She was the kind of person who walked into a room and seemed to draw conversations toward her. For me, an introvert who found comfort behind a keyboard more than at a dinner table, she was magnetic. She filled spaces I left empty. That Christmas Eve, my apartment was staged for a memory. I'd decorated the tree a week earlier, wrapping it in soft white lights and hanging silver and navy ornaments, colors I knew Claire liked. The air carried the mixed scent of pine needles, cinnamon candles, and the faint spice from mulled wine I'd prepared earlier in the day. On the dining table sat an unopened bottle of champagne, chilling in an ice bucket I'd borrowed from my parents' house. I had imagined the sequence: dinner, laughter, maybe a little teasing about my overcooked ham, then the moment, me on one knee, ring box open, the words I had rehearsed 100 times spilling out with sincerity. The ring itself wasn't extravagant, I'm not wealthy, and Claire had always insisted she didn't want flash. It was a platinum band with a 1-carat diamond, clean and understated. I'd picked it after weeks of careful comparison, even consulting her best friend under the pretense of buying a necklace. The small velvet box sat in my jacket pocket as I checked the mirror for the 5th time, straightening the collar of my shirt, palms slick with nervous anticipation. When Claire arrived just after 7, she was radiant in her usual effortless way. She wore a cream-colored sweater dress that clung to her lightly, paired with brown boots, her blonde hair curled in a way that looked casual but I knew must have taken an hour to perfect. She kissed me on the cheek as she stepped inside, her perfume, a blend of vanilla and smoke, lingering in the air. For a moment, the night was exactly what I'd envisioned. But then I noticed it. Something in her demeanor was off. Her smile looked painted on, the kind of smile people give when they're about to deliver bad news. She avoided looking at the tree, the champagne, even the stockings I had hung with her name next to mine. Her hands fidgeted as she set her purse down, and she sat on the edge of the couch instead of sinking back like she usually did. I thought maybe she was stressed from work, or worried about spending the holidays with my family. I had no idea the truth was so much worse. I sat beside her, trying to ease into the moment. I reached for her hand, brushing my thumb across her knuckles, feeling the tremor beneath her skin. That's when she pulled in a breath, steadied herself, and looked at me with a kind of flatness I can't forget. "Daniel," she said, her voice unnervingly calm. "I need to tell you something." I nodded, expecting maybe a confession about a job offer in another city, or that she wasn't ready for marriage yet. But then she said it, words that cracked through the air like breaking glass. "I'm pregnant. But it's not yours. It's Michael's." "Michael. My younger brother." For a full 10 seconds, I couldn't process the words. My brain simply refused to align them into meaning. Michael? No. My brother who had grown up sharing bunk beds with me, who I taught to ride a bike, who I defended in schoolyard fights. My brother, who had been my best man in waiting since the day I bought the ring. The box in my pocket suddenly felt like a stone pressing against my thigh, unbearably heavy. I remember the sound of the clock ticking on the wall, each second louder than the last. My vision tunneled, narrowing to just her face, calm and unflinching. She didn't cry. She didn't apologize. Her hand rested lightly on her stomach, as though she had already committed fully to the life inside her. To him. To them. The humiliation was instant and searing. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was a spectacle. She hadn't waited until after the holiday, hadn't tried to soften the blow. She chose Christmas Eve, a night I had filled with love and hope, to detonate my future in one clean strike. And Michael's shadow hovered over every detail, deepening the wound. I didn't yell. I didn't beg for an explanation. Instead, I sat perfectly still, memorizing everything: the tone of her voice, the way her eyes held mine without a shred of remorse, the faint twitch at the corner of her mouth as though relief had followed her confession. I knew, in that instant, that there was no mistake, no miscommunication. She had chosen him. Christmas Eve wasn't the night I proposed. It was the night my world collapsed. And yet, as I sat there, a strange clarity washed over me. If they thought they could humiliate me, break me, and move on unscathed, they were wrong. I didn't know how yet, but one thing became clear: this wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of theirs. And I would be the one writing the ending. I didn't sleep that night. After Claire's confession, she left without asking if I was all right, without offering me the courtesy of a proper goodbye. The front door clicked shut, and suddenly the apartment that had felt so warm and alive moments earlier turned into a tomb. The champagne on the table sweated into the ice bucket, the ring in my pocket became an anchor I couldn't bring myself to touch, and the Christmas lights on the tree blinked with an almost mocking rhythm. I sat there for hours, staring at nothing. My mind ran in circles, replaying her words until they stopped sounding human. Pregnant. Not mine. Michael's. Over and over. It was like a code I couldn't debug, an error that shouldn't exist in the system of my life, yet there it was, blinking red, undeniable. By 3 a.m, I found myself scrolling through old photos on my phone. Claire and I at the lake last summer, laughing with our arms around each other. Michael standing next to me at Thanksgiving, holding a beer, grinning like the brother I thought he was. And then the images overlapped, my brain forcing me to see what had been hiding in plain sight: the way Claire's eyes lingered on him, the subtle curve of her smile when he joked, the nights she worked late and I never questioned it. I felt like an idiot. Not just betrayed, but complicit in my own downfall because I hadn't seen what was right in front of me. When dawn crept through the blinds, I knew I couldn't keep this to myself. I drove to my parents' house, the same suburban home where Michael and I had grown up. My mother opened the door in her robe, surprised to see me so early, but she welcomed me in with her usual warmth. That warmth lasted only minutes. "I need to talk to you," I said, sitting at the kitchen table, the words heavy in my throat. "About Claire. And Michael." My father joined us, coffee mug in hand, while I told them everything. At first, disbelief colored their faces, shock that bordered on denial. But as I laid it out, piece by piece, their expressions shifted. My mother's hands trembled. My father's jaw clenched. They didn't argue with me, but the silence between us spoke louder than words. When Michael finally showed up later that morning, he walked into the house like nothing was wrong. He dropped his keys on the counter, muttered a Merry Christmas Eve, and then froze when he saw me sitting there. His eyes darted to my parents, then back to me, and in that flicker of hesitation, I had my answer. He didn't need to confess. His face carried the truth. "Daniel." He started, but I cut him off. "Don't," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "Don't insult me by pretending this isn't what it is." He swallowed, guilt flickering across his features, but then something shifted. He straightened, his expression hardening into defiance. "It just happened, okay? We didn't plan it." Those words hit me harder than the confession itself. It just happened. Like betrayal was an accident. Like my fiancée falling into his bed was no different than spilling a drink. He tried to make it sound inevitable, something outside his control, when in reality it was a choice he made again and again. My parents' reaction was immediate. My mother broke down, tears streaking her face as she muttered about family being destroyed. My father stood, his voice like thunder as he called Michael a disgrace. But Michael didn't flinch. He crossed his arms, jaw tight, and held his ground. In that moment, I realized he wasn't sorry, not really. He had Claire, he had the child, and in his mind, he had won. I left before the shouting grew louder, before my parents said things they could never take back. I drove with no destination, the winter sky gray and oppressive above me, until I found myself parked outside a quiet strip mall. I sat there, engine off, watching snow fall against the windshield, my breath fogging the glass. The pain was there, raw, unrelenting, but beneath it something else began to form. A coldness. A clarity. Michael had taken something from me, but he hadn't just taken Claire. He had taken my dignity, my future, my trust. And he expected me to crawl away, humiliated and broken. But he didn't understand me. He never had. I don't forgive betrayal. I don't forget it. As I sat in that parking lot, the beginnings of a plan stirred in my mind. This wasn't going to end with arguments, apologies, or even punches thrown in a driveway. No. If Michael and Claire wanted to bind themselves together with lies, I would make sure those lies strangled them. They had started a fire. I was going to make sure it burned them alive. Christmas Day at my parents' house was supposed to be full of traditions: pancakes in the morning, my father carving turkey in the afternoon, my mother insisting on playing carols long after everyone wanted silence. Instead, it was a war zone. The moment I walked in, I could feel the fracture. My mother's eyes were swollen from crying, her voice raw when she greeted me. My father sat in his armchair, stone-faced, pretending to read the paper but gripping it so hard his knuckles were white. Michael was already there, seated casually on the couch with Claire next to him, like he had decided to drag her straight into the storm. She looked small, fragile almost, but her hand rested protectively over her stomach in a gesture that made my blood boil. I stood in the doorway, the smell of roasted turkey filling the room, and felt like I was looking at strangers. "Daniel," my mother whispered, as though saying my name too loudly might set off an explosion. I ignored her and locked eyes with Michael. He didn't flinch. If anything, there was a glimmer of challenge in his gaze, as though he was daring me to say something in front of them all. My father broke the silence first. "This isn't the place," he muttered, folding his paper. But the tension was already thick enough to choke on. Claire shifted in her seat, then spoke, her voice low but firm. "We didn't want you to find out this way, Daniel." I laughed. I couldn't help it. The sound was sharp, ugly, and it hung in the air like smoke. "You mean you didn't want me to find out at all? You wanted to keep sneaking around until you couldn't hide it anymore?" Michael's jaw tightened. "Don't twist it. We didn't plan for this to happen." "You've been not planning for months, apparently," I snapped. My mother gasped, covering her mouth. My father slammed his fist onto the armrest, the sound echoing through the room. "Enough," he barked. "This family is tearing itself apart, and it's Christmas, for God's sake." But Christmas was already dead. I looked at my mother, her face etched with grief, and realized there was no way to repair what had been broken. Claire and Michael had made sure of that. Lunch was a disaster. My mother tried to salvage some sense of normalcy, setting the table with her best china, placing silver cutlery with trembling hands. But every bite tasted like ash. Conversation was stilted, forced. Claire picked at her food, while Michael shoveled it in like nothing had changed. At one point, my father excused himself, disappearing to the garage for nearly half an hour. My mother kept glancing at the kitchen window as though hoping he'd come back calmer, but when he did, the look in his eyes was darker than before. The breaking point came when Michael, in his usual arrogant way, leaned back in his chair and said, "You'll have to accept it eventually. This is happening, whether you like it or not." The words detonated like a bomb. My father stood so abruptly his chair toppled backward. "Accept it?" he thundered. "Accept that you've betrayed your brother, shamed this family, and dragged her into it? Accept that my sons can't sit at the same table without spitting venom? No. I won't accept it. Not today, not ever." My mother sobbed into her napkin. Claire pressed closer to Michael, who smirked as though he had won some silent battle. I felt the room tilt, rage crawling up my throat, but I forced myself to stay silent. Explosions were Michael's weapon of choice, impulsive, loud, messy. Mine would be quieter. Cleaner. After dinner, I left without saying goodbye. My mother tried to follow me to the door, whispering, "Please, Daniel, don't let this destroy you." But it was too late. Destruction was already underway. I drove home in silence, the roads slick with patches of ice, Christmas lights blurring past like taunts. I thought about the family we had been, backyard barbecues, fishing trips, the time we all drove 12 hours to the Grand Canyon together. And now? We were fractured beyond repair, the pieces scattered in ways no amount of glue could fix. But as painful as it was, that fracture gave me clarity. Michael and Claire weren't just two people who had wronged me, they were a unit now, bound by secrets and lies. And in binding themselves together, they had made themselves vulnerable. Family had been the battlefield. Now it would become the weapon. They thought betrayal had ended my story. But really, it had just given me a beginning. After Christmas, silence became my shield. I didn't answer Michael's texts, didn't return my mother's calls, didn't even open the holiday card stacked on my kitchen counter. The world outside carried on with fireworks and New Year's resolutions, but inside my apartment, the light stayed dim. I wasn't sulking, I was calculating. I've always been methodical. Code doesn't lie. Systems have logic. And when something breaks, you don't scream at it, you trace the error, follow the logs, find the vulnerability, and exploit it. That's how I decided to treat this betrayal, like a problem that needed solving, one bug at a time. The first trail I followed was digital. Claire and I had shared a phone plan, a convenience that now gave me access to her call history. I pulled up the logs for the last 6 months and started cross-referencing. Late night calls to Michael. Repeated texts during weekends when she claimed to be out with friends. Even a 2-hour call on the same night she told me she had a migraine and went to bed early. Next came email. She had logged into her account more than once on my laptop, and though she'd logged out, the autofill still remembered fragments. I used a password reset trick, something simple, guessing security questions I knew by heart, her dog's name, her favorite teacher, the street she grew up on. Within an hour, I was inside. Most of her inbox was clean, almost too clean. No incriminating love letters, no late-night digital confessions. But buried in the promotions folder, I found a receipt forwarded from a hotel. 2 nights in October, downtown, billed under Michael's name but with Claire's email link for confirmation. I stared at it, the dates searing into my memory. That same weekend, she had told me she was at a marketing conference in Denver. I had even wished her luck over the phone, never suspecting she was just across town, in bed with my brother. The paper trail didn't end there. Bank statements, joint dinners, boutique shopping, Lyft rides charged at hours that didn't make sense. A pattern emerged, undeniable once I charted it on a spreadsheet. Their secret wasn't hidden as much as it was scattered, waiting for someone patient enough to gather the pieces. But paper trails only told me half the story. I needed whispers, the things people say when they think no one's listening. I started with casual conversations. I ran into a coworker of Claire's at a coffee shop and asked offhandedly if she'd enjoyed the Denver conference. The woman frowned. Conference? Claire didn't go to Denver. She swapped weekends with me so she could stay local. She said it with a shrug, not realizing she had just confirmed another lie. At a family gathering in early January, I overheard one of Michael's friends joke about him finally settling down. The tone was sarcastic, the kind of ribbing men give each other when they know someone's in over his head. I didn't ask questions, I just filed it away. And then there were the whispers I didn't expect. A message on Facebook from an old acquaintance of mine, someone who'd seen Michael and Claire together at a restaurant across town, holding hands like they had nothing to hide. I didn't say anything before because I thought you knew, she wrote. That line haunted me. Everyone always assumes you know. Piece by piece, I built a mosaic of their betrayal. By the end of January, I had timelines, receipts, and corroboration. Nothing yet that would burn their world down, but enough to draw the outline of a picture they couldn't erase. Still, I stayed quiet. I smiled when coworkers asked about my holidays, nodded politely when my mother begged me to talk to Michael. Silence was my camouflage. They thought I was nursing wounds, retreating into myself. But I wasn't retreating. I was stalking. And soon enough, the net would start to close. By February, I had stopped thinking of Michael and Claire as people. People make mistakes, people apologize, people deserve second chances. No, what they had done stripped them of that. To me, they became problems. And problems are solved, not forgiven. But solving them required patience. A direct confrontation wouldn't give me what I wanted. Yelling would only make me look bitter, unstable. No, I needed proof that cut through every excuse. I needed them to trap themselves. So I turned my attention to shadows. Where they went, who they spoke to, what digital crumbs they left behind when they thought no one was paying attention. I started with Michael. He worked at a local dealership as a sales manager, and his schedule was predictable. Or at least, it was supposed to be. I began driving by after hours, just to watch. More often than not, his car wasn't there. His excuses to my parents, working late, inventory audits, client dinners fell apart under even the smallest scrutiny. Claire was trickier. She knew my habits better, knew how observant I could be. But arrogance makes people sloppy, and she was no exception. One evening, I followed her after she left work. She didn't head home. She drove 20 minutes across town to a small restaurant tucked off a side street, the kind of place you wouldn't stumble upon by accident. I parked across the road, my windows down just enough to hear when laughter drifted out the front door. And there he was, Michael, waiting at a corner table with 2 glasses of wine already poured. I didn't confront them. I didn't even take photos that night. Instead, I sat in my car, engine off, watching through the glass as they leaned close, fingers brushing, smiles widening in ways I hadn't seen from Claire in months. Every detail burned itself into my memory. Not because I needed to be convinced, but because I needed to know exactly how they behaved when they thought they were safe. Over the next weeks, I became a ghost in their lives. I never got too close, never risked exposure. Instead, I collected fragments. A credit card charge for flowers Michael never gave my mother. A Lyft receipt Claire forgot to delete, timestamped at 1:12 a.m. a neighbor mentioning offhand that she'd seen Michael sneaking into my building's parking garage late at night. Individually, each fragment was explainable. Together, they formed smoke, the kind that warned of a fire beneath. But smoke wasn't enough. Not yet. To fill the gaps, I leaned on technology. An old habit of mine, setting up discrete monitors, became a weapon. I installed a small Wi-Fi camera in my apartment before I gave Claire her spare key back. Just in case she came by when I wasn't there. Weeks later, it paid off. One Saturday afternoon, while I was out of town on a fake work trip, she walked in with Michael. They didn't do anything physical, at least, not on camera, but the way they lingered, touching small things I'd bought for us, mocking little details of my life, was enough. Proof that betrayal wasn't just about intimacy, it was about contempt. Watching the footage later, I felt a strange calmness. Rage had burned out, replaced by something sharper, colder. Every smile they shared in that space, every dismissive comment about me, was fuel. They thought they were untouchable. They thought secrecy gave them control. But what they didn't realize was that shadows don't protect you. Shadows reveal you, if someone knows where to look. And I was looking everywhere. By March, I had more than fragments. I had a timeline, one I built with the kind of precision I usually reserved for debugging complex systems at work. Every receipt, every call log, every Lyft ride and hotel booking had a place. Piece by piece, I mapped their betrayal across a spreadsheet that spanned months. It wasn't just evidence, it was a story. And like any good story, it had a beginning, middle, and an end I was going to write myself. I started at the beginning. The earliest inconsistency dated back nearly a year. A girls' weekend Claire claimed she spent in the mountains. Her phone records showed multiple late-night calls to Michael during those same 3 days. Then came the October hotel booking, the one under Michael's name with Claire's confirmation email. That was the pivot point, when their affair stopped being casual encounters and became something more deliberate. From there, the lies multiplied, family dinners skipped, sudden work commitments, unexplained absences that always seemed to overlap. But a timeline alone wasn't enough. I needed irrefutable proof, the kind that couldn't be spun away as coincidence. So I created overlap checks. If Claire said she was at a conference, I checked whether Michael was mysteriously busy at the same time. If Michael claimed to be at work, I verified through dealership business hours, even called the front desk pretending to be a customer. Every time, their stories cracked. The data grew thick with contradictions. On November 12, Claire texted me she was homesick. That same night, Michael's debit card was charged at a pharmacy for prenatal vitamins. On December 3, Michael skipped a family gathering, saying he was working late. His car's license plate, however, was captured on a downtown parking garage camera, parked overnight in a lot 2 blocks from Claire's office. To strengthen my case, I started documenting in ways no one could dispute. I used screen recordings to capture call logs and text histories. I saved receipts as PDFs with timestamps. I even exported metadata from the photos I recovered, one of Michael and Claire at a park, metadata showing it was taken the same weekend she told me she was helping her mom move. Every detail became another nail in their coffin. But evidence wasn't just digital. I wanted eyes and ears. I spoke to a neighbor of mine, an older woman named Mrs. Aldridge who noticed everything from her window overlooking the parking lot. Casually, I asked if she'd seen Michael around. Her eyebrows shot up. "Your brother?" "Oh, yes. Several times, late at night. Thought it was odd, since I never saw you with him." She chuckled, but I didn't. Her casual observation became testimony in my mental case file. The more I collected, the more their lies tightened around them like a noose. And they had no idea. They still paraded their secrecy as if it was a shield, but I could already see the cracks forming. One night, staring at my growing archive of proof, I realized something crucial. It wasn't enough to expose them. I needed to do it in a way that made denial impossible. The downfall had to be surgical. If I simply accused them, they'd lie. If I showed one receipt, they'd claim it was a misunderstanding. No, this had to be an avalanche. A collapse so total that when the truth landed, there'd be nothing left to dig them out. The net wasn't just tightening. It was waiting. And soon, I'd pull it closed with one sharp tug. By April, I had enough evidence to crush them outright. But crushing them outright wasn't my goal. Not yet. I wanted them to walk themselves into the trap, to weave the rope around their own necks without realizing I was the one feeding them the line. So I started planning bait. The first move was subtle. I mentioned to my mother, in passing, that I was considering reconciling with Claire. I didn't say it with conviction, just floated it like an idea. I knew the words would travel. My mother, desperate to fix her broken family, would repeat them to Michael. And Michael, arrogant as always, would rush to reassure Claire that I wasn't a threat, that their secret was still safe. That reassurance would lead to carelessness. Sure enough, within a week, I saw it. Claire logged into our old shared streaming account from Michael's apartment. She probably thought nothing of it, but it told me exactly where she was spending her nights. More importantly, it told me they were letting their guard down. My second move was digital. I sent Claire a text, just one line, funny how some things always leave a trace. Nothing accusatory, nothing direct. Within minutes, she called me, her voice tight with panic. "What do you mean by that?" she demanded. I kept my tone calm, even amused. "Nothing. Just thinking out loud." I hung up before she could press further. That single text accomplished what weeks of surveillance couldn't. It rattled her. From then on, every interaction they had was tinged with paranoia. Michael started driving different routes home. Claire double-checked her phone locks. They thought they were tightening security, but in reality, they were exposing their weak spots. Every frantic adjustment told me what they feared most. The third move was more direct. I left an envelope on Michael's car one night while he was at work. Inside was a photocopy of the October hotel receipt, circled in red. No note, no signature. Just proof that someone was watching. The next day, I drove past the dealership and saw him pacing outside, phone glued to his ear. I didn't need to hear the conversation to know it was with Claire. They were unraveling, snapping at each other over the weight of secrets they thought they'd buried. But the real checkmate came when I engineered a situation they couldn't wriggle out of. I volunteered to help my parents organize the family's spring barbecue, a tradition Michael usually dominated. This time, I made sure both he and Claire would attend. And before the gathering, I seeded a little doubt. I told my father, casually, that I'd noticed Michael acting strangely. I told my mother I thought Claire seemed distant, maybe hiding something. I said it like an observation, not an accusation, but by the time the barbecue arrived, both of them were already watching Michael and Claire with suspicion. When the day came, I stayed calm, quiet, sipping a beer in the corner while my parents scrutinized every interaction. Claire tried to play her role, laughing at my father's jokes, helping my mother in the kitchen. But Michael was jittery, defensive, snapping at small comments. And every time they stole a glance at each other, I saw my parents' expressions tighten. That was the beauty of bait. I didn't have to accuse them. I didn't have to shout. I just had to place the right pieces on the board and let their own guilt do the work. Checkmate wasn't about the final move. It was about building inevitability, cornering your opponent so thoroughly that no matter which way they moved, they lost. And Michael and Claire were running out of moves. By May, paranoia had done half the work for me. Michael and Claire were cracking under the pressure of shadows I had deliberately cast over them. But suspicion wasn't enough. To finish this, I needed undeniable, verifiable proof, the kind that survives scrutiny, the kind no one can dismiss as jealousy or bitterness. I decided it was time to collect it. The opportunity came faster than I expected. Claire still used her old email on occasion, and one night I noticed an alert, a dinner reservation at a quiet Italian restaurant across town. 2 seats. Friday night. I knew Michael would be the other guest. I arrived an hour early, parking across the street with my camera ready. I wasn't interested in grainy zoom shots through a window, I needed something sharper. So I positioned myself near the entrance, blending into the evening foot traffic. When they arrived, 10 minutes apart but clearly meeting, I snapped photo after photo. Their faces, their hands brushing, Michael leaning in too close. Each frame carried metadata, timestamps, GPS tags. Evidence not just of presence, but of intent. Still, photos could be dismissed as coincidences. I wanted audio. So I followed them inside, keeping distance. The restaurant was small, the kind of place where conversations carried easily. I slid into a corner booth, phone angled discreetly. Their voices floated across the room, low, intimate. Claire's words sealed it. "We can't keep sneaking around like this. Daniel's not stupid." Michael leaned closer, his voice rough. "Let him figure it out. He'll have no choice but to back off once the baby's here." That was it, the smoking gun. Not suspicion, not implication. A direct admission, recorded with crystal clarity. When I played the audio back later, I felt something inside me settle. The rage that had been boiling for months cooled into something steadier. Proof didn't scream. Proof didn't lash out. Proof waited, silent and sharp, until the right moment to cut. But I wasn't finished. I dug deeper into digital trails. With careful probing, I retrieved old WhatsApp backups Claire had forgotten to delete from her cloud storage. Among them were dozens of messages exchanged with Michael, threads of affection, complaints about me, even discussions about how to break it to him eventually. Each message was timestamped, each bearing metadata that tied them to their devices. One thread in particular stood out, Claire complaining that I had grown distant, and Michael replying, "Good. The less he suspects, the easier this will be." It wasn't just betrayal, it was strategy. They had been coordinating, plotting, turning me into a pawn in their little game. And now, every word of it was in my possession. By June, my archive was airtight. Photos with timestamps, audio recordings, digital messages, receipts, testimony from neighbors and coworkers, even footage from the hidden Wi-Fi camera in my apartment. Each piece on its own might have been denied. Together, they formed a fortress. I didn't just have proof, I had a weapon. And I knew exactly when to fire it. June bled into July, and with the evidence secured, I knew it was time to move from gathering to execution. Proof meant nothing if it rotted in a folder on my laptop. Proof was only powerful when delivered publicly, when denial became impossible because too many eyes were watching. The trick was timing. Exposure had to hit like a thunderclap, not a drizzle. If I confronted them privately, they'd spin it, twist it, gaslight me until the truth lost its shape. But if I chose the right stage, if I dropped the avalanche where everyone could see, their lives would collapse instantly. The perfect opportunity arrived in late July, my parents' annual summer barbecue. It was the one event Michael never missed, a chance for him to preen in front of relatives and old family friends. Claire would be there too, smiling that polished smile, acting as though she belonged. And that day, surrounded by people who thought they knew us, I'd set the record straight. I prepared meticulously. On a Friday evening, I packaged everything into a clean, accessible format, screenshots printed and bound, audio recordings burned to a thumb drive, photographs embedded with metadata displayed in a slideshow. No clutter, no ambiguity, just truth, sharp and undeniable. The barbecue began like every other year. The smell of charcoal, laughter from the kids running across the lawn, my mother fussing over potato salad. Michael strutted around like he owned the place, slapping shoulders, cracking jokes. Claire floated beside him, hand brushing her stomach now beginning to swell, basking in the attention. I kept my silence until the moment was right. When my father raised his glass to toast family, I stood. My heart pounded steady, not from nerves but from control. This was the moment I had engineered for months. "I have something to add," I said, my voice even. Conversations died instantly. Dozens of eyes turned to me. Michael smirked, Claire stiffened. I set my laptop on the patio table and clicked play. The slideshow began, photos of Michael and Claire entering restaurants, timestamped and tagged. Receipts from hotels. Screenshots of messages. And then the audio, Claire's voice saying, "Daniel's not stupid," followed by Michael's, "Let him figure it out. He'll have no choice once the baby's here." The air thickened. No one moved. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, tears welling. My father's jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. Cousins shifted uncomfortably, friends whispered, neighbors stared. Michael surged forward, face red, sputtering. This is out of context." I raised a hand, calm as stone. Metadata doesn't lie. Neither do timestamps. Every word, every image, every receipt, it's all verifiable. This isn't context. This is truth. Claire's face crumpled, but not with remorse, with fear. She clutched her stomach like a shield, but no one moved to comfort her. Even the relatives who used to adore her couldn't look her in the eye. For the first time in my life, Michael looked small. Not the golden son, not the smooth talker. Just a man stripped bare in front of everyone he had fooled. The silence broke with my father's voice, deep and final, "Get out." He wasn't shouting. He didn't need to. Authority rolled off him like a wave. Michael stammered, looking around for an ally. There were none. Claire tried to take his hand, but he jerked away, consumed by his own panic. They left together, not in triumph, but in disgrace, whispers following them through the yard and into the street. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I simply closed my laptop, finished my drink, and sat back down. The evidence had spoken for itself. And their world had collapsed. In the days after the barbecue, Michael's downfall moved faster than even I had predicted. Exposure works like a virus. Once released, it spreads uncontrollably, infecting everything it touches. And I had released it in the most public way possible. The first crack appeared within our family. My father cut him off completely, refusing to take his calls. My mother, torn between anger and maternal instinct, tried to reason with him at first, but when he deflected blame, claiming I had manipulated the evidence, claiming Claire had seduced him, her patience evaporated. "You're not a child," she told him. "You knew exactly what you were doing." She stopped answering his messages after that. Our relatives followed suit. Cousins unfriended him on social media. Aunts and uncles who once praised his charisma now spoke of him in low tones, embarrassed to be associated. At family gatherings, his absence became the norm. His name, when spoken, carried a weight of shame. But the damage didn't stop at home. His job at the dealership unraveled next. Word travels fast in small towns, and customers don't like buying cars from men exposed as liars and cheats. A colleague leaked that Michael had been underperforming for months, distracted and missing shifts. When the scandal surfaced, management seized the chance to cut him loose. One morning, I drove past the dealership and saw him outside, cardboard box in his arms, his career reduced to a pile of desk junk. Claire was with him, hovering nervously by the curb. But even from a distance, I saw the fracture between them. She wasn't clinging to him the way she had before. She looked away while he argued with the manager, her body language already retreating. Betrayal, I realized, had a half-life. It bound them at first, but once the consequences arrived, the glue dissolved. By August, Michael was jobless, broke, and isolated. Friends he once drank with avoided him. The bar where he was a regular turned cold, whispers following him until he stopped showing up altogether. His phone, I imagine, must have felt heavier each day, fewer names willing to answer when he called. One night, he showed up at my apartment. I didn't let him in, but I listened through the door as he pleaded. His voice was ragged, desperate. "You ruined me, Daniel. You didn't have to do this." I stood in silence, hand resting on the knob, listening as he shifted from begging to anger. "You think you're better than me? You think exposing me makes you clean? You're just as twisted. You planned this." His words echoed down the hall, but I didn't respond. Eventually, his footsteps faded, leaving only the quiet hum of the building. He was right about one thing. I had planned it. I had orchestrated every step of his collapse, not out of rage but out of necessity. Because men like Michael, men who steal, who betray, who think consequences are for other people, don't learn through forgiveness. They only learn through ruin. And ruin was exactly what I gave him. If Michael's collapse was swift, Claire's was slower, more corrosive. She had always been careful about appearances, her Instagram curated to perfection, her reputation at work spotless, her words measured to maintain an image of poise. But exposure doesn't respect appearances. Once the truth cracks the surface, it seeps into everything. In the days after the barbecue, she tried to carry on as if nothing had changed. Photos of quiet nights in and baby prep still appeared on her feed, but the likes dwindled. Friends who once commented with heart emojis fell silent. A few brave ones posted thinly veiled jabs, "Loyalty matters or karma doesn't miss." The digital applause she thrived on vanished, replaced by whispers she couldn't control. At work, her veneer lasted longer. She pitched campaigns, led meetings, forced smiles. But offices are ecosystems built on gossip, and her colleagues had all seen the same proof I'd shown at the barbecue. Screenshots traveled faster than memos. Within weeks, whispers followed her down hallways. Clients asked to be reassigned. By September, her manager encouraged her to step away from maternity leave early. We both knew it wasn't encouragement, it was exile. But the real collapse came in private. She had expected Michael to be her shield, the man who would protect her when the storm hit. Instead, he was too busy drowning in his own disgrace. Their relationship, built on secrecy and thrill, couldn't survive the weight of exposure. Arguments replaced intimacy. Neighbors overheard shouting late into the night, Claire's voice sharp with desperation, Michael's bitter with blame. By October, she left his apartment and moved back into her parents' house. I know this not because I stalked her but because she told me herself. One evening, weeks after the move, I found an envelope slid under my door. Inside was a letter, handwritten. Her words were shaky, full of regret, an attempt at apology. "Daniel," it began, "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I need you to understand, it wasn't about you. I made mistakes, and I will live with them forever. I hope someday you can move on, even if I never do." I read it once, then again, searching for sincerity. But what I found wasn't remorse. It was self-pity, a plea for absolution to ease her conscience. She wasn't apologizing to heal me. She was apologizing to save herself. I folded the letter carefully, slid it back into the envelope, and tucked it into the same drawer where the engagement ring still sat. Not because I wanted to keep it, but because it was evidence too, evidence that she knew exactly what she had done. By winter, she gave birth. I didn't attend, of course, but I heard through my mother that the delivery was difficult, the baby small but healthy. Claire posted a photo online a week later, her face pale, eyes tired, smile forced. The caption read, "Our greatest blessing." But Michael's name was missing. He hadn't been there. Ashes of what we once had, of what she thought she had with him, were all that remained. No engagement, no wedding, no future. Just a broken woman holding the weight of her choices. And me, finally free of her shadow. Winter came again, 1 full year since the night my life split in two. The city looked the same, streetlights glowing over snow, windows flickering with Christmas trees, but for me, everything had changed. The wounds had scarred over. The rage had cooled. What remained was quiet. Michael had disappeared from our family almost entirely. My parents no longer spoke his name unless necessary. He floated between odd jobs, his reputation in ruins, his circle of friends evaporated. Sometimes I heard about him secondhand, an eviction notice here, a bar fight there, but he was no longer a presence in my world. He was just a shadow, fading. Claire lived with her parents, raising her child in strained silence. I knew she was struggling, though I didn't need details. Social media painted the picture clearly, fewer posts, fewer smiles, captions that tried too hard to sound hopeful. Whatever fantasy she thought she had built with Michael had turned to dust long before the baby arrived. As for me, I had rebuilt in ways that weren't visible to them. My career thrived, I threw myself into projects, earning a promotion by summer. I started running again, something I hadn't done since college, the rhythm of my feet on pavement grounding me. I spent weekends with friends I had neglected, rediscovering parts of myself I thought I'd lost. Slowly, life became mine again, not the one I had planned, but one I chose, piece by piece. One evening, close to Christmas, my mother invited me to dinner. The table was smaller now, fewer chairs filled, but the warmth was still there. We ate in relative peace, laughter returning in fragments. At the end of the meal, she pulled me aside. "You seem lighter," she said, searching my face. "I am," I admitted. And it was true. Revenge hadn't consumed me, it had freed me. I had taken what they tried to destroy and used it as fuel to reclaim myself. On the drive home, snow began to fall, thick and steady, coating the roads in silence. I parked, stepped out, and stood for a while, watching the flakes spiral under the streetlight. My apartment window glowed faintly above me, warm and waiting. Inside, the ring still sat in a drawer, untouched, a relic of a past that no longer had power over me. People think revenge is about rage, about screaming and breaking and punishing. But they're wrong. Real revenge is quiet. It's methodical. It's patient. It doesn't need fireworks, it needs precision. And when it lands, it doesn't roar. It whispers. And that whisper echoes forever.